This is it, the real deal. Hello everyone, this is the LEGO Technic V-22 Osprey, officially licensed model that was released very briefly before being pulled off the market. If you have any questions about its cancellation, check out the pinned comment in the video description. Also, if you have any questions about how I got this. I've got some batteries in here, so I will be powering this up and showing all of its functions, but I first want to just kind of take you around the glorious model that this is, even as a display piece. Now, in case you haven't heard, I am not a Technic specialist myself. Technic is just not my thing. That said, I can definitely appreciate a good-looking toy or collector's model of a thing, and I can also appreciate some mechanisms, some good working mechanisms that make some sense and do some things that are somewhat realistic. This offers both to a great degree. And guess what? The build, even for me as a non-Technic specialist, was enjoyable. It didn't have a lot of frustration along the way, which is surprising for how complex it is and how large it is. There are a lot of pieces. There are a lot of points along the way where you have to line up a whole lot of Technic pins on parallel side-by-side lift arms or something like that, and that requires some time and some care, but it wasn't bad. What was particularly striking to me in a good way as I went through the build process was that I did not find myself needing to massage gears, axles, and bushings in the working bits very frequently to ensure that there wasn't too much tightness, to ensure that there was just a tiny bit of gear lash so that things would not bind up. Frequently, that's something you have to pay a lot of attention to, but the fundamental design of this and of its mechanisms along the way and on the inside made that practice practically obsolete. Many things are spaced out on their own as needed throughout, and places where you're going to be tightening things together, you're going to be squeezing things together, frequently will have something in the way that is rigid that will prevent you from tightening things up too much. So that was a tremendous win and felt better than it needed to be, better than normal Technic that I'm used to. Beyond that, the model does not compromise very much between working mechanisms and functions and a solid exterior finish. It has all the panels, although many of them are actually stacked up lift arms, but it has all the coverings of the exterior aircraft skin that you would expect, in spite of having a ton of gears and a ton of axles and levers and all sorts of mechanisms that move inside. So you get a good look, I think, from the outside that is displayable, and you get something that really works. To make things work, there's an integrated 6AA or LR6 or LR06 battery box on the underside. They make it very easy for you to change out the batteries. However, the box on the whole is going to stay in place. This is a relatively new unit that works with the whole Control Plus system and the modern WeDo 2.0 style of plugs. It's not at all compatible with power functions. However, this is a manual unit that does not require an app, and as a matter of fact, does not work with an app. It has just a physical switch. The bad thing about this unit is that it has only 2 power outputs. The good thing in this model is that only one motor is used for everything. Okay, it's demo time. Here is the on-off switch, and when I flick it, you will hear that one single motor spinning up, connected to nothing right now. It'll be in full neutral gear. Here's the cargo bay door function. It's pretty smooth, and notice that the back flap kind of retracts in as well in a realistic way. There are also stickers on that ramp, and there's a little bit of hollow space inside if you wanted to simulate transporting some cargo. I don't particularly recommend it. It's not designed for that, but it is possible. And when you get to the ends of the movement of anything, when you hear the clicking sound, that's a clutch that's actually saving the gear train from damage. Next, here's the retract system. It's a little bit slow at first as it unlocks the gear, but then it pulls them up slowly and smoothly. Again, you hit the clutch. And to bring it back down, it's a little bit quicker, but then there's a little extra time you have to wait right at the end, again, to finish the locking. And those are very sturdy, so they will hold up the weight of this very well. Of course, you want to see the rotors spin. Ooh, that's rough. The motor comes all the way down to just above 0 RPM before it's able to transfer enough torque through there and the rotors themselves give and allow it to spin up. You can angle these a little bit to move just a slight bit of air, but there is a little bit of a design issue with that. Let me show you a detail up a little bit closer. You see, each rotor blade is actually hinged and able to be changed in its angle of attack. However, to change that angle of attack, you have to move the cone out of the way a bit, which basically starts to slightly disassemble the model at that point. So it is something that is doable, but without modification. Technically, if you have this put together properly, it just makes everything nice and flat and feathered, and then you're not able to feel as much air. The other most important function of this tilt rotor is, of course, to tilt the rotors along with the entire engine assemblies here. However, my model has a problem with that. Let me demonstrate. Motor on. Operate mechanism. You can see it's kind of wobbling just a little bit. Now if I give it just a little nudge, it kind of wants to go. Kind of. Try to help it out by moving the rotor a little bit there. No. All right, let me put it back. Okay, it's going in the opposite direction. Ooh. Oh, there's so much torque in there, but it's not turning. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. Here's a bunch of the gearbox mechanism opened up so you can see what's going on inside. You can see you've got the idler gears that are just running smoothly right now. And when I engage this, ultimately it needs to turn this shaft right here with the large tan gear on it. And in fact, it is turning that, which is exactly what needs to be moving. And the universal joints heading out to the engine pods are turning as well, but the engine pods themselves are just sitting there. So what's going on? There's a disconnect between here and here. Strangely enough, it's kind of a feature. There's a secondary inline clutch that's been made with a sleeve and a couple of axle pins. There are just those regular, annoying, always prevalent axle pins in blue. The axle portion goes into this, axle portion goes into this. The pin portions with the friction ridges are inside of the white sleeve. And you see the white sleeve rotating at half speed right now. That's supposed to transfer torque through it via just the friction pins, but clearly there's not enough friction in there to do that. Now, my engine pods are able to move very freely. There's no binding here that's preventing this from occurring. There's just not enough friction with the pieces that I personally got. I've heard that I'm not the only person to encounter this, but it's relatively rare, and I could just override that by putting an axle in there and taking the clutch out. I don't want to do that though, because I don't want to risk doing extra damage. And also, this is important to ensure that even if your two pods get out of sync, their angles, they can get back into sync as soon as you reach the either end of the range of motion. Now, it could easily be said that I'm supposed to have the rotors spinning while I do that, and then additional torque helps everything to work. And that's a nice thing to say, but I have tried that multiple times, even though you shouldn't. More on that in just a moment. It doesn't help in my case. There's something that's off with the pieces. I'm just not getting enough friction through there. And that's a shame, because it's a really nice mechanism when it works. Not only are you rotating the entire engine body here, and it has stops to make sure that it goes completely horizontal or completely vertical. It allows the torque to continue to be transferred right through the center to get out to the rotors themselves so that you can have the rotors spinning while this is going. And it also operates the rear control surfaces across the wings on either side, and those are also accurate and appropriate. So it's all engineered pretty nice, except for that one little bit that's not working so well. And one other little bit that's also renowned for not working well at all. If you've followed the saga of this model, or you've seen anybody's review of it, you know that I'm talking about that little gear right there, or rather that trio of little gears. There are 3 of them stacked vertically to move ultimately the torque, the rotation from the motor up a little bit higher into this selectable gear train area up here, which includes the working for rotating the rotors themselves, for spinning them up, and for rotating the entire engine assemblies to make them go forward or into their vertical position. So all the torque of the major functions of this go through those small little gears, and those gears themselves are actually shockingly strong. I've heard many people say that those are just too weak for the job. I don't entirely agree with that. However, there is a fundamental issue here where those gears can move around. They're given too much lash, they're given too much space to move back and forth. There's this loose lift arm over here, this gray one, that's able to move around, and then there's just a short little axle going through there, even shorter ones farther down. So some of these small gears are able to ultimately wobble around quite a bit. They're able to get well out of their intended tolerance range, and then they start to bevel each other in strange ways and twist the teeth to the point where they become severely damaged. There are a couple of fixes out there that are very, very simple. I chose personally to not implement that fix or any of those fixes because I personally wanted to see this entire model in its stock original form. Now, I'm not the type of YouTuber who likes to destroy stuff just for the sake of destroying stuff, so I'm not going to try to destroy this model here. However, that right there is bad. That is not a good thing. I don't recommend it. That's all torque going through those tiny little gears with way too much lash in them and way too much space to move around. You can see the little lift arms shifting from side to side even. It's not a good thing. And then you combine that with also the mechanism to supposedly rotate the engines, which is not working at this time, but all that torque is having to go through those. And I can clearly see that that is a bad design choice. Fortunately, it's very easy to fix. It's worth pointing out that, like on the real V-22, you do not spin up the rotors on the ground with the engines facing forward because they will stall. Now, supposedly all the clutches that are involved in this entire system should prevent any damage from occurring, but given the fact that you can damage your gear train just from running it normally and not making any mistakes like this, again, I recommend that you be very, very careful and ensure that you are in vertical takeoff and landing mode before you even turn on the motor, much less start spinning up the rotors themselves. Funny enough, there's a lone manual function in this. This little nub that sticks up right here operates the elevator controls. Just, they go down. They don't go up as well. It's awkward. The way this went together feels funny. If you build the model, you'll know what I'm talking about. But ultimately, it works just fine, except, again, it only moves in one direction. Weird. The last small details I want to point out are suggestions of pilot and co-pilot seats in there. And there's even a main console with some details. It's difficult to see without taking it off, but that's just a sticker on a 1x6 system tile. The pile of leftover parts from this set is small. The sticker sheet, on the other hand, is not. Yeah, that was a lot. I especially don't like placing stickers over panels that have the indents in them because they always like to trap air underneath and they're a pain to get aligned down the center. The retail price of this set was intended to be $150 US, which, if you ask me, is a great deal. Or rather, would have been a great deal if they had actually released this thing widely as originally planned. It's just such a shame that so much good work went into designing this thing and that it couldn't be released. You know, it couldn't receive a full worldwide wide release. A lot of people would have enjoyed it, but I mean, it's very obvious that it could not receive a full worldwide release because it very clearly and just so obviously directly 180 degrees opposes LEGO's very public stance on not producing realistic depictions of modern World War II and beyond military stuff in realistic scenarios. They've done 2 tilt rotors based on this basic design before, and they were perfectly fine. They did one for Creator, they did one for City. They were not realistic military models. They were not in realistic scenarios. They were inspired by the overall design, but they were perfectly fine. There is finally a civilian spin-off of this craft that they could have gotten a license for if they wanted to do a nice tilt rotor. It would have had the exact same mechanisms, or very, very similar mechanisms, and they could have done it just as well, I'm sure. But no, they went for the V-22, and how the entire design organization that was dedicated to supporting this collectively deluded themselves into believing that putting a little bit of orange, just a little bit of orange onto this thing and a few stickers that said rescue would turn it into something other than what it obviously is. A license, not even trying to skirt around anything, just a full on 100% licensed model of a 100% military only vehicle. So dumb. I don't get it. Had they done this right, had they done a model like this that per their public company policies they could have released, surely a lot of people would have complained about the gearbox issues. A lot of people have complained about the gearbox issues. And surely, just as Lego has done a number of times before, they would have released a service pack to fix that. It's just a handful of pieces. It's very easy, very straightforward with a little instruction sheet. I've even taken advantage of the service pack, post-release service system that Lego provides when they make a boo-boo, when they recognize that they have a design flaw. With the Wally set, when I got the Wally set, I got the original release that had the neck that, I don't know how that got out the way that it was. It just would fall back. You move the thing a little bit and it just looks like it's dying with a broken neck. They came up with a new design for that works, and they sent out the replacement parts to anybody who requested them, free with good instructions, and it was all good. They definitely would have done the exact same thing for this. It definitely needed it for the small gear issue. This issue that I have with the tilting, I think I need to look into that a little bit more. If anybody in the comments has experience with this or with that issue, please do let me know. I'm very curious about it. I believe I just got a bad batch of parts there. I wasn't interested in taking it apart to try to look into that further, but I do need to look into it further. But if you can give me some cheat codes on that, I would appreciate that as well. I love this thing though. Otherwise, it has a few quirks, a few small issues, but otherwise it looks nice on display, even though it does have the modern blue pin, red connector, yellow axle issue of modern Technic stuff. It is so well covered and has so many mechanisms to it that I feel there's a good balance here. It even probably looks better than it needs to. It's smoother, it's more covered, has more fairing on it than it needs to, I think. I personally am not that bugged by the off-color stuff here. And speaking of colors, they introduced a bunch of new recolors specifically for this model, stuff in gray, some stuff in orange as well, that the battery box was new at the time. They'll be using that further, and you can actually buy that now. That's not the best battery box. Again, it has 2 switches, 2 outputs, and that's just it. It would have been really nice to have more outputs, especially since you can't stack the outputs on the modern system like you could with the older ones. But yeah, I'm not bothered too much by the off-color stuff. The new colored stuff must have been a boon to custom builders, custom Lego builders, especially those who want to do their own custom military models using the dark gray color. Must have been great, but that supply got cut off. Hopefully more models will come out in the future that will offer those same parts and even more for the custom building community. I will be keeping this long-term on display. I will be cherishing it and probably not running it very much, but just enjoying having it. I feel very fortunate to be able to have it. Very thankful to the viewer who sold this to me at a very, very reasonable price, offered it to me at just a regular retail price plus shipping, and I offered up a little bit more beyond that, but it was just very kind. And yeah, I feel very fortunate to have been able to experience this, even though there are a few little flaws with it, and there was a lot of drama surrounding its release and then its unrelease. Let me know what you think about this overall, and if you have any ideas about that, I would appreciate it. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you again soon.